Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Best of Panama Lerida, Wash Process Panama from Leuchtfeuer Coffee. And there's the bag right there. And Leuchtfeuer, based out of Wedel, Germany. And once again, they were a suggestion to us by Uluman. So for the last time, shout out to and thank you to Uluman for this suggestion. This is the fourth and final part of our Leuchtfeuer series and our fourth ever full bag review from this coffee roaster. And let me give you a little bit of background as to what this coffee is, as it's one I've been paying very close attention to for a while now. So for those that don't know, I also pay very close attention to the Best of Panama. And in the Best of Panama, it's broken down into three categories: your natural geishas, your washed geishas, and then all other varietals. And when I was looking through the list of the other varietals, there were two coffees that caught my interest. And it was a washed SL28 and a washed SL34, both from Finca Lerida. And then at the end, when I saw that Leuchtfeuer had purchased the SL34, it's one I knew I definitely wanted to try when they did release it, because I've always wanted to review just a straight washed Panamanian SL28 or SL34 coffee. So I was very curious to see how it would turn out. So once this coffee was released, that was the final straw, the final domino for me to finally purchase from this coffee roaster. And this is about as excited as I've been to discuss a coffee in a very long time. So definitely looking forward to discussing this one, as this right here is day 40. And recipe we went with for this coffee was Leuchtfeuer's recipe, which is a 15:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 93 degrees Celsius, about 199 degrees Fahrenheit. And I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Roast profile for this coffee, as we've alluded to with this roaster, they definitely do roast on the lighter side of things. It's very much on par with a lot of Nordic light coffee roasters, and this one's no exception, as I feel like a lot of people would consider this to be a very light coffee, once again by most standards and metrics. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 17, first impression, and the very first takeaway I had was that there was a noteworthy elegance to the cup right from the start, as there was such a pronounced Kenyan brightness to the cup with all the clean and defined floral components right at the forefront. It did settle off into a big, beautiful, hard candied sweetness, and as a result, it was a very pretty first cup. Even then, I felt like there was still some work to be done with this coffee, as it was quite nice, but I still felt like the best was yet to come. Day 20, ran it to the Chemex, and once again, there's an abundance of brightness. Even more so than on the first day, as there was a bit of this undefined brightness and this lasting Kenyan berry aspect to the cup. Long lasting, yet again, quite tart, just slightly different, but still along the same sort of pattern and expectation you would have for this coffee. Day 22, ran it through the April brewer, and it's exactly what I was looking for in this brew method. And honestly, maybe I should have persisted with this brew method a little further, because this was just a wonderful day. Very pretty, bright, candied cup right from the start. Absolutely beautiful in the floral aromatics on the nose, followed up by an almost tart, light, hard candied sweetness. It was a very pretty, elegant cup of coffee on this day too. Really impressed by this one. One of the best cups I've brewed actually this entire year. Day 25, adjusted to Leuchtfeuer's recipe, and it was once again a really pretty day for this coffee. Florals seemed a bit more accentuated, but in a slightly candied sense, and it radiated some very strong pink aspects to the cup, very much in line with those hard candy sweet components. Strong brightness, but still a very pretty cup all around. Really impressed on this day as well. Day 28, same adjustments to the Chemex, and once again, it's a really nice day to this coffee. It is settling exceptionally well into the lovely floral aspects with a strong pink candied sweetness. Extremely clean and well-defined cup. That's the thing I wanted to get across, is a lot of the reason I wanted to try a Panamanian version of an SL28 or an SL34 is because I was very curious to see just how much clarity I'd be able to pick up from this origin, and I was truly marveled at just how much clarity I was picking up. Also keep in mind that this is a very high scoring cup of coffee as well, so I did go into it with those high expectations that it would have a very defined profile. And on this day, that definitely did come through, as there was plenty of that Kenyan-like brightness yet again, and it was a very well-rounded cup. Another really impressive day of this coffee. Day 30, back through the V60, and it's another amazing day for this coffee, as it continues to offer immense clarity with an extremely well-structured cup. In terms of that pink brightness, it is very vibrant, very sweet, an abundance of the hard candied characteristics, as well as a candied florality. It's very sweet, it's very candied, it's very floral, it's got some great brightness to it. Another amazing day. I'm going through these notes a lot, but that's because it just continues to remain very clean and well-structured. Day 33, back through the Chemex with their recipe, and it's at this moment I settled on the V60 as the preferred brew method. Both are very clean. I feel like this was maybe a slight bit of overkill, as I enjoyed the vibrancy slightly more through the V60. It continues to have, actually interestingly, a little bit more definition through the V60. I think with a little bit more vibrancy came a little bit more definition in general. Brightness a bit more kind of everywhere in this method, so it's not necessarily as defined, well structured through this. So that was kind of interesting to me. Even then, you're kind of splitting hairs. It's very close in terms of the differences you're able to experience from those two. And on day 36, final notes I have, last go through the V60, and I continue to marvel at the extremely well-defined, well-structured Kenyan-like candied components within this cup. Very bright yet again, really enjoying that part, reminiscent of what I've described as a candied pink lemonade with a bonus candied florality. Very pretty cup, so many great sweet characteristics to it, just really exceptional cup of coffee from start to finish. All right, well, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. All right, and we have 3 level 5s, so let's go through those real quick, and we'll start with the cleanliness level 5. Yes, I know that's slightly generous. This is a very, very clean cup of coffee, and I feel like it's a slight bit of a stretch to score it as high as maybe some Panamanian geishas, maybe some really clean wash processed coffees. But I feel like relative to what it is, an SL34, this is the cleanest SL34 I've ever had in my entire life, so I couldn't help but put it at that level 5, full well knowing that it was maybe on the slightly lower side of level 5, but I just really wanted to hammer home how clean this cup of coffee was. Finish, level 5. Yes, that's another thing. This one had a very lovely candied finish to it, a very lovely bright finish to it. But even then, it may be a little generous on that level 5. I just kind of wanted to point out just how wonderfully prominent that finish was and how well structured, well defined that finish was as well. Sweetness, that's the 3rd level 5 that I know is slightly generous being that high, but even then, it's the sweetest SL34. If we're just talking washed coffees, I don't want to put it in the same sort of category as maybe some anaerobics or some natural processed SL34s I've had. But by this standard, by washed standard, yes, it was very, very sweet. And it's something I've been discussing a lot throughout this review. And I know it's a little generous putting it out there at that level 5, but I really wanted to hammer home just how sweet this coffee was as well. Very sweet, very clean, and very long-lasting finish to the cup. Then we have still a handful of level 4s, starting with the acidity level 4. Yes, there was a very well-defined brightness with this coffee right from the start, and it was very reminiscent of a Kenyan coffee, and that's what I was fully expecting going into this one. And I really appreciated the brightness, mostly because the other components in it, the sweetness as well as the clarity, were in higher measure than the brightness. So I'm actually very happy with that being there at that level 4 mark. Florality, level 4, yes, and it was a very candied floral component. This was a pretty red cup of coffee. It was a pretty Kenyan cup of coffee, as you would expect, with significantly less of the savory aspects. That's actually the first time I've even used the word savory within this review, so great florality, really appreciative of what that offered within this cup. And then the berry fruit, level 4, yes, it still offered so many of those Kenyan candied berry aspects to it. And that's something I really wanted to kind of emphasize about this coffee as well, is that it very much had that Kenyan flavor profile. I've had Kenyan coffees that had very similar traits and characteristics in terms of cleanliness, sweetness, as well as that well-defined berry fruit aspect to it. And those typically tend to be my favorite Kenyan coffees of all time. So given that this one offered those things and maybe slight bit more of prominence, this one right here was just really impressive with all of those things. Citrus fruit, level 4, yes, it did have that brightness, and at times it did feel a little bit like a lemonade, a very candied lemon component to it as well, complemented by that very tart, bright berry component as well. So those two things I feel like both justify that level 4 mark. I really wanted to emphasize just how clean and sweet those things were. And while none of them scored that level 5, given that this tasting wheel all kind of goes together, you can see just how noteworthy those things were within this cup. I think the only two things worth discussing outside of that is the savoriness at that level 2. Yes, I think I just couldn't help but shake the feeling that it still has plenty of those Kenyan characteristics to it, and it's ever so slight. I would not say that it has any of that tomato, but it does have that Kenyan-like feel to it, which oftentimes will lead me to at least putting it there at that level 2 mark. Body, Level 3, I think that's kind of the last thing worth discussing. I don't think that there's really too much to say on that one. It's kind of fully expected. It does have a very bright kind of Kenyan body to it. With a higher concentration, in theory, maybe you could say you expect it to reach a level 4. I would say it's on the higher side of level 3, as it does have a very well structured body, a very textured body to the cup in general. But honestly, I feel like that's everything in this tasting wheel that's worth discussing. I feel like, if maybe a little generous, it's a pretty accurate representation of what I was getting from this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee. I did go into this one with some extremely high expectations, and I want to say that this one at least met them, if it did not exceed them. Now, if we're talking about this coffee as a Kenyan coffee, this would probably be my favorite Kenyan coffee that I've ever reviewed on this channel. This one was truly impressive from start to finish, mostly because it offered everything that I specifically look for in Kenyan coffees. But even by that standard, I do want to say that this one impressed me for a Panamanian coffee too. This was a wonderful Panamanian coffee, and it's been very different from a lot of the other Panamanian coffees I have had, but it felt like a great marriage of the two origins in certain aspects. So of course it still offered the wonderful clarity that a lot of Panamanian coffees offer, and that really nice sweetness that I do enjoy from them, while still offering a lot of the Kenyan characteristics, of course the bright berry and the brightness in general. So the marriage of those two things really made for an exceptional and enjoyable review. It's going to be tricky because that Firestone is also a very special coffee, and that one is also Panama, and this one will fall into the Panama category. So where this falls in terms of my favorite Panamanian coffees would get tricky. At the very least, it's going to earn a spot in my top 10 coffees of the year, at least in the honorable mentions category. It's rough that it's competing against Panamanian coffees, because if this was a Kenyan coffee, I could easily see this finishing as a top 5 favorite coffee of mine this entire year. I was really impressed by this one, and once again, that was going into it with some extremely high expectations and standards. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you've ever been curious yourself about what would happen if you had an SL28 or SL34 from Panama, then I really want to emphasize trying this coffee, because this is also a very high scoring coffee, and it does give you a great idea of what that coffee is capable of. I wish there were more coffees out there like this, because this one just felt so unique. I've never had anything like this from Panama especially. So I think that would lead a lot of people to being very interested and curious about this one. In addition to that, obviously your Kenyan lovers, I feel like this offered great clarity and a lot of Kenyan characteristics to it as well. So that's another direction I can point somebody towards in this one. And I think that's kind of the best way I can leave this review. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Well, this right here has been a review of the Best de Panama Lerida, wash processed Panama from Leuchtfeuer Coffee. Thank you for watching.